Hey. Time for another out-of-this-world story from rSpace. Love, the most intoxicating of feelings, often leading us straight to heartache. Today on rSpace, this cheater will never financially recover from her lies and deceit. My wife cheated and got scammed by her affair partner. I left her to deal with the debt. So I'm writing this as a way to finally put everything behind me. I'm 33 now, and my ex-wife, who's 3 years younger, still tries to insert herself into my life at every opportunity. Let's call her Darcy. I'm over it, and this is my way of putting it out there for good. Once this is posted, I'm planning to go ahead and ask the court for a restraining order. I just need to move on and be done with her trying to stalk me and pop back up whenever she feels like it. Darcy and I met a few years ago while working remotely on a branding project. My job was to design profiles for everyone involved, so I ended up sliding into her DMs to send her the finished design I'd done for her. She liked it a lot, complimented my work, and she was really friendly right from the start. So naturally, we kept talking. Then, one day, she calls me out of the blue, saying she's coming to my city for work and that we should meet up. I was single at the time and I wasn't really expecting anything serious, but I was curious. From what I'd seen in her pictures, she was attractive, and I figured it would be nice to finally meet face to face. I wasn't necessarily gunning for a relationship, but hey, if it happened, I wouldn't have been upset. She'd picked out a restaurant, and the conversations with Darcy were just as warm and friendly as they had been in the DMs. Not too long after that, we started dating. It happened naturally. One of those fun nights when she was in town, I asked her to be my girlfriend. She said yes, and just like that, we were official. After dating for a little over a year, we decided to get married. I should add that her family, especially her mother and her sisters, didn't like me. They went through with the marriage, but in many ways they showed me I was too poor for their daughter. These guys were just a bit higher than I was in terms of social class, but somehow they thought they were better than me. Financially, things were good. Darcy moved to my city permanently and I was still working as a designer, but I had landed a better paying gig. Plus, because we were both in the same industry, we always plugged each other into projects whenever we could. It took a while to have a baby, and when we eventually did, it was the happiest time of our married life. The baby and Darcy were doing great for about 5 months, but unfortunately, Darcy had a miscarriage. I work remotely, so I was home when it happened. She was getting ready for work when she suddenly cried out in pain. I was trying to comfort her when I noticed the blood. Actually, I think we both saw it at the same time because she immediately started crying. I freaked out and called 911 right away. At the hospital, the doctors told us she had a miscarriage. They said it was likely due to her overworking herself. It was a tough time and it was really sad for both of us. But I reassured her that we'd have more babies in the future, though we never did. And after a while, she seemed to get back to her normal self. I tried to do everything I could to make things easier for her after that. I got her a new car and moved us into a bigger apartment. I even paid for her to have a professional website built, which I designed myself, to help with her job. I also co-paid for her assistant to lighten her workload. For a while, it felt like we were back on track. Things were going well again. Looking back, I'm honestly grateful we didn't have kids while we were married. I know that sounds bad, especially considering she had a miscarriage, but I can't help but think that it would have made things so much harder. If we'd had a child, I would have been way too attached, and it would have held me back from doing what I eventually had to do. I wouldn't have wanted to hurt the mother of my child, and that would have changed everything. For the sake of this write-up, I'll admit something about myself. I have a short temper. I've always been like that, and Darcy knew it from the start. No, my temper wasn't the cause of the problems that eventually came up. The real issue was that she wanted me to feel like I had no control. It wasn't about compromise or partnership anymore. She just needed to assert her independence in a way that felt like she was trying to prove something, and that's where things started to unravel. Nothing too crazy at first, but out of nowhere, Darcy started packing her bags and leaving to go stay with her family whenever we fought. This behavior was new, and the first time it happened, I just assumed I must have really messed up that time. Since she'd never done anything like that before, I thought maybe I had pushed her too far. So, of course, I called her up and apologized, practically begged her to come back home. And she did. But now, looking back, what should have bothered me then was the fact that her family didn't try to send her back, call to mediate, or even ask what had happened. It was like they were okay with her just leaving. They didn't like me though, so it sort of made sense. And surprise, surprise, it happened again. This time it was worse. Her siblings actually called me to yell at me, saying I wasn't treating their sister well. They said I was the cause of her miscarriage. That part hurt like hell. They made it seem like I was a good-for-nothing man their sister was shackled up with. At this point, I was still in love, so the idea of divorce wasn't even on my radar. I just figured we'd work it out like we always did. One day, during one of our arguments, she pushed me so hard that for the first time, I actually locked her out of the house. I just couldn't deal with it anymore. Naturally, she ran off to her family again, but this time, they took it a step further. They took her to the police, trying to make it look like I had abused her. The whole thing spiraled into a huge mess. My parents had to step in, and before I knew it, we were doing marriage counseling. The funny thing is that it actually worked. The whole packing up and leaving thing stopped, and her family stopped interfering in our business too. This was 5 years into our marriage, and things started to feel like they were going back to how they were when we first started dating. But I should have been more cautious though. I mean, anyone who could let the false narrative of me being an abuser fly through her family and with the police, even though they didn't accept the accusations, was definitely someone I should have been wary of. But, as I said before, love has a way of clouding your judgment. So every now and then, I like to head out and work from different spots. I'd choose a location beforehand, grab some food, and maybe do a little sightseeing. Just something different from the usual. It was during one of these outings that I saw her. I told myself I must be mistaken. I thought it was someone who looked like her or dressed like her. My mind was trying to make sense of it, but something didn't sit right. So I followed her. I knew she had an office she rented for work, but it wasn't even close to where I was now. And I wasn't aware she was meeting anyone here or had any events going on. I tailed her to a restaurant and saw her meet up with a man I'd never seen before. She was all smiley with him, but it didn't seem suspicious. But I needed to keep watching. I had a baseball cap on, so I walked into the restaurant, hoping I wouldn't be recognized, ordered a drink, and sat back to watch them. I stayed long enough to see her say goodbye and leave. The guy, though, he stayed behind. At this point, I figured I'd try to get some info from him. I approached him and made some comment like, "You got a beautiful woman," and to my absolute surprise, he said, "Yeah, she's my girlfriend." My mind went blank. I was too stunned to hear anything else he said. I just found myself walking away. How I got to my car, how I drove home, everything after that was a blur. I went straight home, took a shower, drank a few too many glasses of wine, and passed out until Darcy woke me up for dinner. When I asked how her day went, there was no mention of her meeting anyone. The next few days were tough. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. I knew I had to find out more about this guy. I checked her phone. She had been protective of it lately, but I had my way of getting into her phone. I saw she was calling a particular person named Diego often, so I took down the number and also searched for that name on her social media accounts. Then, sent the handles to my phone and sent screenshots of their conversations too. What I found out is that he was constantly posting pictures of himself on vacations, driving expensive cars and living what seemed like a luxurious lifestyle. But something didn't add up. At this point, I knew I needed help, so I gave his phone number and social media info to a tech colleague who was into cybersecurity. I asked him to dig up everything he could on this guy. What he found was very interesting. Diego was a scammer. He had a long history of conning women, living off of their money, and creating this fake image of a wealthy businessman. That image made it even easier for him to scam more women. One of the earlier photos that he had on his Facebook page had been posted in a Twitter thread that was calling him out and asking other women to beware. It wasn't even certain if Diego was his real name. So not only was she cheating on me, but she was cheating on me with a scam artist. I became determined to ruin her life from the inside out, and the best way to do that was to make sure she trapped herself in her own lies. First, I needed to shift her focus from me so I could operate without suspicion. I subtly encouraged her growing obsession with Diego by pretending to be more distant and more distracted. Whenever she complained about me or hinted that she was unhappy, I played along. I even started to act like I was considering leaving at first. This made her more reckless, eager to cement her future with Diego, who was feeding her all sorts of fantasies about their dream life together, at least in the screenshots I had. And it wasn't just her. Her family was in on it too. In their eyes, Diego was money and what their family wanted for their daughter. This time, my friend did a much deeper dive into Diego's social media history. It was clear that Diego was involved in some shady dealings. He found old accounts linked to Diego's email address, and on them were multiple complaints from women across the country. These women were talking about how Diego scammed them out of money for business investments that didn't exist. They had filed civil suits, and the pattern was undeniable. This was the opening I needed. I didn't need to take Darcy down myself. I just had to push Darcy a little further into his mess and wait for things to implode. Here's where the patience and strategy came in. Like I said, I started playing dumb. I pretended I was stressed with work, acting distant like I wasn't even paying attention to what Darcy was doing. I didn't fight with her anymore. I barely engaged. This pushed her right into Diego's arms, making her feel more justified in spending more time and, most importantly, more money on whatever he was promising her. He was her new fantasy life, and I was the guy she couldn't wait to leave behind. At this point, Darcy had no clue I knew about Diego, and I made sure to keep it that way. She started making investments with Diego. My almost daily snooping had shown. Darcy started taking out loans in her name. She thought she was smart, thinking Diego's business would pay off and everything would be fine. It took a few months, but eventually, Darcy started to see cracks in Diego's stories. She began asking questions, trying to figure out why her investments weren't paying off, why they were not moving, or why he wasn't pushing for marriage. It wasn't long before Diego pulled his disappearing act. He ghosted her for weeks, and when she tried tracking him down, he was nowhere to be found, probably working his next target. The best part? By the time she realized what happened, her savings were almost gone. She couldn't even pay off the loans she'd taken out to give him. Thank goodness all my money wasn't in the joint account. I don't know when it finally clicked in her head that Diego was never coming back and all her financial investment was gone. All I can remember is the day she came to me, saying we needed to talk. When I gave her a listening ear, she started crying and trying to ask me for help. Told me everything that happened with Diego, minus the cheating part, of course. You have friends in tech who might know how to hack or dig up info, right? Shut the hell up. To someone who didn't know about the cheating, her story was rather moving, but me? I wasn't having it. That's when I dropped the bomb. I'd been tracking everything. I had screenshots of her texts with Diego, copies of her financial transactions, and a full timeline of when she started funneling money out of our accounts. To crown it, I gave her the divorce papers to sign. This woman became hysterical. She started screaming and throwing herself everywhere. At a point, I had to grab her by the shoulders and shake her to try to get her to snap out of the scene she was causing. There was no way the neighbors' attention wouldn't have been summoned at that point. The last thing I needed was for one of them to call the police, and she'd tell them I abused her. Then she went on her knees, begging me. She started acting crazy, like her psyche was threatening to collapse. I won't lie, I was very concerned and had to call her friend to come over ASAP. When her friend arrived, she learned of what happened and packed a few things, eventually taking Darcy with her. As scary as that had been, it didn't mean that I forgave her. After a few days, Darcy started calling me, and when I couldn't take the disturbances anymore, I blocked her, but not prior to telling her that any info she wanted to pass to me should go through my lawyer. She tried visiting the house, but I told her if she tried it again, I would involve the police. I guess she went home after that because I started getting calls from her family, but I blocked them too. We had to go to court because she, and her family, didn't want to negotiate peacefully. It was tricky, because in the middle of the case, it didn't look like I was going to get the good side of the split. But fortunately for me, the divorce proceeding was karma at play. First off, because we didn't have kids, thank God for that, custody wasn't an issue. But the financial side? That's where things got messy. In most states, including mine, marital assets are divided equitably in a divorce. That doesn't necessarily mean 50-50, but rather what's fair under the circumstances. I knew that Darcy had started by funneling money from our joint account, and because she didn't want me suspecting anything, she gradually graduated to pushing her personal savings into Diego's fake business ventures. I made sure to present all the evidence of her spending during our marriage, showing how she had recklessly mismanaged even her own money, leaving her with nothing but debt. I shouldn't have to suffer for that. I had hired a good and expensive lawyer, and we laid everything out. The loan she took out in her name, the money she sent to Diego, and overall financial irresponsibility. The court wasn't sympathetic to her financial woes. In fact, they ruled that she was solely responsible for her own debts. She tried to argue that she had been manipulated by Diego, but the judge didn't care. It wasn't a criminal case, it was a divorce. And in divorce court, the only thing that mattered was how the assets and debts were divided. Thanks to my lawyer's expertise, I walked away clean. No spousal support, no division of debt, nothing. Darcy, on the other hand, was left to deal with the mess she'd created. The judge ordered her to repay the loans she took out on her own, and because her personal savings was drained, she was stuck with nothing but a pile of debt and a ruined credit score. No Diego, and no me either. The best part of all this? I didn't have to do anything illegal or shady to get my revenge. It was all by the book. I simply let her dig her own grave, and then made sure she couldn't crawl out of it. Legally, she was stuck with her own poor decisions, and there was nothing she could do about it. After the divorce, she tried reaching out way too many times, probably thinking she could sweet talk her way back into my good graces with different numbers and through different means. I'd block her, and she'd get at me through a new account or number. That's why I'll be filing for a restraining order, citing her continued harassment, and I'm so sure that I'll get it. If she tries to contact me or shows up unannounced, she's in violation of the order, and that's a whole new legal headache for her. Anyway, That's how I handled it. It wasn't dramatic or violent. It was methodical, calculated, and legal. I let Darcy's own actions destroy her, and now I can finally move on with my life. She's still out there, drowning in debt and chasing after a guy who's long gone. And me? I'm just doing fine. Ready to put all of this behind me for good. So yeah, if you're ever in a situation like mine, Hollywood-style revenge isn't always the answer. Just be smart, document everything, and let the legal system do the heavy lifting. Your strategic approach to handling the situation, rather than giving in to anger or drama, shows a level of maturity that not everyone possesses. I'm envious of your self-control. Not only that, but filing for a restraining order is a necessary step to protect your peace and ensure you can move on without the constant reminders of the past. I hope that brings you the clarity and the space you need to focus on your future. As you start this new chapter, remember that prioritizing your own well-being is crucial. Take the time to rediscover what makes you happy and fulfilled, whether it's exploring new hobbies, spending time with friends, or just enjoying some quiet time to reflect. You deserve to find joy and build a life that's free from past burdens. Here's to fresh starts, OP. Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.